Alright, we've got a very diverse group of 4 movies here, for better or worse. So let's go right into them, starting with Rampage, the big one of the weekend, I guess. Uh, so, this is obviously another of many to come and many since past for big action blockbuster starring Dwayne Johnson, just this year alone. And the only thing I really knew going in was that it was based on an arcade game, I think, and that it involved Dwayne Johnson and a gorilla and maybe some other things, but it was all very vague to me. So it was a little exciting to figure out exactly what all different directions it was gonna go, regardless of what the end result is. Because starting off, it was a little confusing because it was one of those cases where you kind of wonder if the right movie started or not, because we start in space, actually, and it's really not that bad of an opening, where we've got, who I'm pretty sure is Marley Shelton, and it's like Gravity, only with like monsters, and a really deadly ultimatum that's been given to her. Um, and this is ultimately where this all, something goes awry, something comes down from space, and we get the crazy shit that's going to happen. It's the seed that's planted for all the action scenes to follow. And then boom cut, and what a surprise, Dwayne Johnson's in the jungle again. So, and it's really hard to tell exactly if it was explained. It's somewhere lost in dialogue, but I really don't remember much of anything in regards to this. It seems a little vague in regards to what exactly he's capable of and what exactly he is, because they obviously set him up. You know, he's the dude that looks after the gorillas, and he like trains them, he looks out for their safety, all that other stuff. Yet apparently he's also very highly trained in kicking people's asses, and he can fly helicopters. So I don't know. He's a Dwayne Johnson character. That's what his job is. So to start off with immediately, I kind of heard going in that it wasn't like a movie that critics were going insane for, so I wasn't quite sure what kind of B movie to expect. But then B movie kind of went way out of my head for a second when we see these gorillas, among other things, and the effects are like flawless. When they get bigger, they get a bit more, effects looking, but when they're just in here like this, and I know with like, the Planet of the Apes trilogy and all that stuff, it's like, yeah, if there's one thing that CGI seems to have perfected, it's apes for some reason, but that's where we get a lot of practice in that field, I guess. But yeah, and it was to the point where I had heard something about maybe an interview or something where Dwayne Johnson had mentioned like working with gorillas or something, but it's like, if any of these scenes with the gorillas were real gorillas or CGI, I really could not tell. That's how really good the CGI is, at least in these scenes. So that kind of threw me off immediately, like these holy shit great effects in a movie like this that sounds so cheesy. But then the cheesiness does come into play. We do have Malin Ackerman and her brother Jake Lacey as our villains, I suppose. And it's like, these are villains like right out of a sci-fi TV movie, like the Sci-Fi Channel, which is not a compliment. And yeah, and it is obviously ridiculous, and I suppose that's expected given the kind of movie that this is. And it eventually, on Dwayne Johnson's side of the story, it basically starts to turn into Honey, I Blew Up the Ape, as this Gorilla George is getting progressively bigger as it goes because of what's all happening with space and all that other shit. So, yeah, it does have B-movie written all over it, despite the fact that the effects are incredibly stellar. So, there is that sort of interesting balance there, and you do have characters that come in and out, like Jay Manganiello is brought in very early as this dude that is apparently supposed to be like a gigantic big deal. He's like, his introduction is Mount Akron looks at her brother and she's like, hey, remember when you called those guys killers are us? Well, he's the us. Whatever the fuck that means. It basically means he's the big old badass. He's got the scar, he's got the guns, he's got the dudes and all that. He's the one that's going to go in, and this may or may not be all for nothing. This may just be all big build-up for not a whole lot, for jack shit. Maybe that's the punchline intentionally, I don't know. But also, our other kind of major supporting character, besides Naomi Harris, who is fine, you know, is like the, as we've seen in like the Bond movies and all that, that she can do the action heroine thing. It is kind of clunky in regards to what direction they want this character to go, because it's like, she's just, for pretty much the whole movie, impressively enough, they avoid what you expect, and she's just kind of her own thing that just happens to be alongside Dwayne Johnson and Jeffrey Dean Morgan throughout this. It's only in like the last 30 seconds or so of the movie where they like start to just go in that direction out of fucking habit, I guess. But for the most part, it's fine. But yes, then there's also Jeffrey Dean Morgan, who seems like at the start he might be like just the suit guy, the guy that just comes in and says, "Oh, you were gonna do all this, you were gonna do all that, but here's our rules and shit to prevent you from doing that." But the interesting thing they do with this character, once again, for better or worse, he's like he's the suit guy, but he's like constantly got his gun visible on his hip. They keep making that a big deal, but I don't recall him ever actually using it, or for that matter, pulling it. But it's there. And he's like just instantly antagonistic when he and Dwayne Johnson meet. Like, you almost think there's like some kind of history there or something, but then again, maybe not. Once again, maybe something that got lost in dialogue, but in a movie like this, I guess the dialogue's not really what you're paying attention to, but, yeah, there's like this instant competitiveness to them, which starts off very like, oh, we've seen this shit before, but obviously both of them are likable enough actors and can bring this through. These are two interesting actors to watch kind of have this seemingly rivalry going on that are ultimately, they're on each other's side, but they're also going to remain assholes to each other as it goes. It's that old thing, but with their charisma and the chemistry they kind of have when they do this, it ends up fine for the most part. But talking about, you know, that dialogue, and it's like, I know you go into a movie like Rampage caring about the dialogue, there's probably no saving you, but sometimes it's like, you just really don't, you probably just shouldn't have bothered at all if you were going to put anything in there. Like, mainly this other dude that works with them, it's supposed to be like his comedy sidekick or whatever, or one of them, I guess. These characters just kind of disappear after a while, but, like, we get lines, like, comedy lines, where it's like he's talking about how Dwayne Johnson's really good with women, and so it's like, oh, I should be like him, and I guess the punchline is, well, if you want to be like Dwayne Johnson, you want to build up your muscles, right? But no, that's not what he's talking about. He says, I should shave my head. But it's like, not only is that just like, why is that in there, but it's like, it was awkward because the people in the theater were just like silent. like not even a courtesy chuckle. People were just like, it's like everybody agreed, it's like, well, that's just not a line that should be in there. And then the same guy later just like calls Dwayne Johnson a big lug, and it's like, what kind of fucking sitcom bullshit is this? But, you know, once again, with a movie like this, maybe that's not what you should be paying attention to, I guess. So that takes us to the action, and like I said, the effects are amazing, but the action itself does feel a bit, not just redundant, but kind of derivative, like we've seen it before. There's the scene on the plane that kind of sets off the events of the rest of the movie, starting from the middle to the climax. And it was reminding me a lot of the plane scene in The Mummy from last year, the Tom Cruise one. Only that scene was much better. Yes, I did just, you know, pay a compliment to the Tom Cruise Mummy movie. If something popped into your head, go to the fucking hospital. So, and there's also, you know, you come here also for, like, creatures fighting and shit, and it can get a little cool, but there's always something in the back of your head saying, like, you know, it's Jurassic Park-like. Jurassic World-like, too, I guess. And there's also the, just kind of the old cliches that will never die. Like I almost paid it a compliment because there's a point in time when a helicopter falls out of the sky and it, like, hits a wall and then hits the ground. And I was sitting there, it was like, oh, well, at least the helicopter had the decency to be in an action movie and not spontaneously explode for no reason. And then just as I thought that, just laying on the ground, not doing anything. Yes, of course it does. I mean, why wouldn't it? Why did I think that would not happen? But it's like in Bulletproof with Damon Wayans and Adam Sandler when the plane that's out of gas hits a wall and explodes. All right, so yeah, it's one of those movies where I guess you either just go with that or you don't. Because there's enough of, there's some sarcasm in some of The Rock's lines where it's kind of like, okay, I get every now and then there's, like, a piece of self-awareness in there that comes lurking out, and it's like, okay, so maybe they do know what they're doing, but I mean, when I say either you're with it or against it, it's sort of like, yeah, you totally expect a movie like this to be really big and really stupid, and obviously there's a portion of you that wants it to be stupid. Like, you'll find it endearing, you'll see that B-movie quality in it, but there is a point where even in movies like this, no matter what you're dealing with, there's always going to be a line in regards to just how much stupid we're looking at. And I think this movie crosses that line, to where it's like, I get it, but I mean, did it really have to go this far in its stupidity? Mainly talking about the plot itself and Malin Ackerman's objective. And it's like, I mean, when your whole plot is based on it, you can't really ignore the stupidity of the whole thing, and it becomes a little too much. So, like I said, even in a movie like this, you gotta be really, really fucking dumb to cross a line, and I feel like this movie does that, so that's unfortunate. Because it even gets to a point to where, like I said, normally, like, if this is a movie I liked, to be fair, I wouldn't be pointing out these little things, but the fact that it doesn't work for me makes me notice and get bothered by stuff like, there's a whole moment when they decide how they're going to fix pretty much everything, like almost everything. They can just do it with, like, one fell swoop, just fix everything. But the way they do this is they rely on Gigantic George to do something that he does not do, and they play it up as this is something he would naturally do, despite the fact that we've never seen him do this, and there's nothing to allude to the fact that he would do this, and they just assume this is what he will do in this scenario, which will fix everything. And it's like, well, that's fucking lazy. That's what that is. So stuff like that, like I said, would probably go under the radar in a more likable movie. And it's not like the movie's unlikable. Like, it's easy to, get into. It feels short. It feels pretty fast, and it's like, what, an hour 45 or something. So, and, for movies like this, which explore such, familiar territory, which usually can feel like they're kind of just dragging you through the mud, the fact that this movie does feel fast-paced is an accomplishment for sure. But, yeah, overall, though, it just, once you add up all the pieces, it's just kind of like, I feel like more thought could have been put into that, even with the kind of movie that it is. And even then, it's like, it's supposed to feel like this really big thing. Like, when you think of the concept and the fact that the title is Rampage, you imagine, I mean, we do get something big. I mean, don't get the wrong idea. There's certainly... I think most people won't be underwhelmed, but then it's just like, I couldn't take my mind off the fact that we had this whole city that I'm pretty sure they said had been evacuated. So it's like when you hear evacuated city in a movie like this, you're like, there is no end to the possibilities. We are going to see destruction upon destruction upon destruction. Yeah, it kind of just feels like the whole climax is like in one corner of the city when you really look at the big picture. So that's... yeah, there's something underwhelming about it, but, it's like, The Rock is always going to be likable, especially when he gets to bounce off this Jeffrey Dean Morgan character. And like I can't say this enough. The effects are fantastic. So there's a lot here that's helping, but it's one of those cases, like I said, in the long run, you kind of just look at it as a whole, and you're like, yeah, but even a movie like this could have benefited from a little more effort in regards to why this shit's happening and how they go about fixing it and what the conclusion's going to be. And it just feels like it's really quickly cobbled together and makes this thing that looks really big and elaborate and expensive and detailed into something that feels very, this is just what this is, that's all we care about at the end. So, and not in the endearing way, so, yeah. But I'm sure people who go to a movie like this that just kind of want to go win it and then come out of it and then that's the end of it, yeah, it's gonna do its job. But as far as, kind of feeling like there could have been more done, it just kind of lingers afterwards and doesn't do it a favor. So, yeah, it's just kind of in the middle there. Alright, let's go on to something completely different, which we're going to do pretty much every time, with Isle of Dogs, the long-awaited Wes Anderson movie, which is him going back into the glorious world of motion capture following Fantastic Mr. Fox 9 years ago, about 8.5 years ago, because it was Thanksgiving 2009, I think. And yeah, it's obviously a Wes Anderson movie that is devoted to dogs, and so your first thought is like, so is this basically his big, elaborate apology for killing all those other dogs in his movies? I don't know, is this for Buckley and all the others? Yeah, and it did kind of, I felt absolutely humiliated that it took somebody telling me to realize the title, Isle of Dogs. I love dogs. Yeah, I don't know why I didn't see that, but... So yeah, and yeah, it does certainly, from a guy who's killed at least one dog in almost every movie he's made, it is a very endearing love letter to dogs in the long run. Not to say that one or two might not be sacrificed here and there. There's a whole island of them, though, so there's plenty to go around. And this movie takes a lot of interesting approaches to a lot of different things. There's one thing that I was wondering about through the whole movie, about how it translates in other places, because this whole idea of all these characters that, speak Japanese... And we're even told at the beginning, not do they just play it up like that, but there's also the barks have been translated to English and stuff like that. But they don't give us subtitles. So there's kind of that universal thing of how, I guess it's like a reverse thing of, usually we can't, understand dogs because they just speak in barks, but it's like, now that these dogs, we're hearing through English, we hear, like dogs, we hear the humans talking, but we don't understand them. Not totally sure how this works, somebody watching it that does speak Japanese. So I guess it's just like this small thing for one group of people. I know going on that as well, the movie has been accused a lot recently of being racist. I mean, call me ignorant. I'm not quite sure where all that stems from. I haven't really read into it either, but, so I've heard that going around, that there was some controversy that people see it as racist. I don't know. I saw it as more of almost like an experimental thing, in regards to not doing that, but, like I said, it does make me wonder, how this works internationally, this whole concept, but I guess that's funny. We'll find out later. But there's also their approach to the animation as well, because there was, and I'm not quite sure what the difference is exactly, because it's not a field I'm really, really knowledgeable about, but when you look at the animation in Fantastic Mr. Fox, and you can tell it's got that stop motion look to it. And here, it's more like you still get that, but the motion is a lot more like fluid, which really works in some really interesting ways. And the way they kind of toy with that in regards to like, we're looking at this kind of animation, but if somebody's like on a screen or on a security camera, it's like the more traditional animation was a really interesting touch. But then you look at the dogs themselves. The human characters are just kind of, whatever they are, but the dogs in particular, how expressive they are. And one of the reasons it's so important how well this works is the fact that not just because we can admire the detail endlessly, but the fact that this movie got really well known in its advertising because of how almost obnoxiously massive the cast list is. And a lot of recognizable names and a lot of recognizable voices. And that usually becomes a huge distraction when you can, like, pinpoint what every voice is. Or if you can't quite pinpoint a voice, you spend the whole movie wondering who it is. And it just doesn't do the movie favors because that's all you're thinking about is the voices and the actors. And then you can see them, like, in the sound booth and shit in your mind as this goes on. And that's the thing, is it might seem distracting because you can immediately identify which dog is which. You know immediately which one's Norton, which one's Bob Balaban, which one's Murray, which one's Goldblum, Cranston, obviously. But that goes away pretty quickly because usually when that's a problem in other movies, it's because those other movies are so fucking bland, not just in their character work, but their animation. Here, the dogs are like so expressive and have such distinct personalities that even though you recognize their voices, you still don't really go past. You're not trying to look any past anything else except them right here. And they could have been. Some of them could have been a bit more developed. But sometimes that's okay. I like the fact that Norton, Balaban, Bill Murray, and Goldblum basically might as well be like one four-headed creature. The way they like I don't think we ever see them apart. And the way their lines just kind of bounce just back and forth off of each other, almost like in a line every time. And that just really works, like I said, even if it leaves the others a bit underdeveloped and puts Norton a bit more in the spotlight than the others. It really works in that way. How they kind of almost function as like one character, pretty much. And obviously Cranston doing his thing as well. I do think, as great as Cranston's voice work is, and the way his relationship with the kid becomes very interesting, there is a portion where it's like the other four are like barely in it, and they're almost like an afterthought after a while. And it does feel like the movie's missing something once we go in that other direction. More so in like, I guess it's probably about the second half that we have it. And it's a lot more interesting when there's less focus on the human characters. Like, the kid is fine because he's like one kid, and that's kind of where the whole story stems from. But then you introduce like the Greta Gerwig character, the foreign exchange student, and it's like, just when you're thinking, oh, I much prefer hanging out with dogs than I do the human characters, this human character comes in and just, like, almost takes center stage. And you can feel the movie kind of take a hit when that happens. Especially since she's so, like... I think I read somewhere that Wes Anderson said that she was basically... Because we'd gone so far in the movie with the whole no subtitles approach, that we needed the foreign exchange student to basically get the rest of the audience there, and you kind of function as that translation, even though we have, Frances McDormand doing her whole thing throughout, which works just fine, because it's mostly her voice. Like, we barely even cut to that character. It's just, like, all voice work. Once again, very recognizable voice, but still just kind of works in general. Same for Courtney B. Vance narrating. But, yeah, but for the most part, that's kind of where I felt like we kind of ran into trouble a little bit, when it kind of seemed like the dogs themselves, the Isle of Dogs, go figure, becomes less and less of a focus as the movie goes on. But yeah, we got that little subplot with the Ken Watanabe character and all that, but it's, yeah. And then there's also, when it starts, and this might sound like a lot of criticism coming up, but I don't feel like strongly critical of this movie. Like, the things I bring up are just kind of like, I found these a little bit bothersome, but overall the movie does absolutely work. But like like the Anderson style, people have been saying, I've been hearing a lot lately that like ever since Moonrise Kingdom, people have been thinking that he's just gotten really redundant at this point. But it's like, first off, if it took you if it took you all the way up to Moonrise Kingdom to realize that he's got a distinct style, it took you a long ass time to notice. But also, I don't know. I feel like even though it's certainly him all over, and it's certainly like his same camera angles and all that, and the way things move, the production design, the way the characters interact, all that stuff, you can absolutely tell it's his. I always felt like the Grand Budapest Hotel was like a really interesting turn, because it's like, yes, it's a Wes Anderson movie all over, but it's significantly darker than the other ones, and I feel like that and his movies tend to have gone in some dark directions before, regardless of how upbeat they remain through it. So yeah, I don't really feel like there's been too much of a, oh, it's the same, I'm getting tired of it now, because I feel like the Grand Budapest Hotel was enough of a different kind of surge that like really kind of shook things up a little bit in his filmography. But yeah, watching this, it's kind of like he put his most Wes Anderson-y self into this movie. And number one, you can see it as admirable, because it's like obviously like 98 or 95% of his movies are, live action, and they have this very distinct style, but it's like when you watch Fantastic Mr. Fox or this, it's like even in animated form, when his characters are talking animals, that style is there, and it is that distinctive, and that any director can have a signature that distinctive is impressive in itself. But then there's also that other side of the line where it's like, where does his filmography reach redundancy in this concept? And yeah, it really just kind of depends on where you go. I do think we kind of hit the redundancy on this a little bit. Like I said, it almost felt like he really started to understand exactly his trademarks, and then just amplified them as much as he could with this. And there's and not just even the live action ones either, like the scenes, and obviously there's scenes like this in his live action ones as well, but the scenes in like Fantastic Mr. Fox, when they like go over plans, or they have like supplies they're going through, I feel like shot for shot scenes lifted from one of his movies to the next, when we get to this one. And it's, yeah, so I do think he does walk that line, but I see it from both sides. I see the admirable side of it and the redundant side. But there's probably enough of a balance to keep it fine, to keep me from saying, okay, do something else, which I don't know that you can ask of Wes Anderson at this point. But which is fine. Like I said, if you've got a style that's distinctive, I mean, go for it. But like I said, bring a Grand Budapest Hotel in every now and then to really shake things up. And Grand Budapest Hotel is only going on 4 years old this month, which isn't that long ago. It feels like it was not that long ago at all. So yeah, I'm more or less fine with that. And like I was talking about, the animation is really well done. There's especially, I heard they spent like months on that one sequence alone, when he's like deboning the fish and chopping it up, and then the octopus tentacle and all that. So all of that is great, but then every now and then we do, like I said, the way we kind of stray away from the other dogs. And we got Cranston and the kid kind of doing their own thing, and he runs into the Scarlett Johansson dog, Nutmeg. And it's like, there's something here that I feel like was supposed to be more, where it's like they have like the one scene of dialogue, and then when we get to the end, they have another scene of dialogue to where it's like they're playing it up like they've been through the shit together or whatever. That's what it feels like. But it's like, once again, maybe I missed something because I saw a shitload of movies this week. I don't really recall them having another scene of dialogue apart from that first one, and so this scene kind of just feels like almost like a forced conclusion for these characters almost. I guess it's something that just kind of feels like it's just kind of made to go in that direction, regardless of if it has warranted it up at this point. But yeah, but I mean, like I said, for the most part, it's all very much. There's a lot to admire here. Like I was thinking before, it's may potentially be one of those movies I admire more than I like really liked watching it. But I guess somewhere down the road we'll see what another viewing does to it. And lastly, real quick, as far as being a love letter to dogs, I was very touched by something. It was when I talked about losing my dog Archie a couple of years ago that I'd had since I was 10. That was a 15-year life, and it was there's a scene in Isle of Dogs where it's just a shot of a bunch of dog tags laying out that are names, and Archie is one of the names like on the top, and that just kind of struck me in a way that like really means a lot to me. So I really like that was in there, even though Wes Anderson has no idea who I am or who my dog was. It still means a lot to me. So, once again, way in a different direction. You Were Never Really Here, the Lynn Ramsey movie starring Joaquin Phoenix, that I kept hearing more and more about as it was slowly getting released, all the way up to the VOD release. And the one thing that excited me more than anything was to have Lynn Ramsey doing this, because she did like Ratcatcher, which I absolutely love, that I do not recommend watching unless you're in the mood to be absolutely, incredibly, horribly depressed. And obviously she did We Need to Talk About Kevin, which is probably the closest she's come to being mainstream. And now we have this, with Joaquin Phoenix as our lead. And I had heard a few things, like I was kind of thinking I knew what to expect because of Ramsey's previous movies. But then I started hearing stuff like... I didn't really know what the story was until a friend of mine was telling me about it. She was raving about it. And she was telling me that it somewhat gave her vibes of Hardcore, the 70s movie with George C. Scott, which I love. And obviously, if you look at the poster and just his character in general, yeah, there's probably going to be inevitable references to Drive, because his weapon of choice is a hammer, and he doesn't say a whole lot, and goes around and does damage. And obviously, you know, as an extension, obviously Taxi Driver as well. The whole protecting young girls from the big bad dudes that want to use them in horrific ways. And it really, this is one of those movies that I don't know that you can be prepared for, especially if you know little about it going in. Where we have this character played by Joaquin Phoenix who is like constantly face to face with death. He's seen it, he has caused it, and he is most likely suicidal. We see him like, he seems like he's just messing around in his downtime, but to do this, he's like sticking knives close to his mouth, he's standing on the edges of bridges. Clearly, this dude and death are like this far apart at all times forever, for God knows how long before the movie even started. And he's got this weird, sketchy past that we see in these like frenetic cuts that are not entirely easy to piece together, but we sort of get the gist of it. They show us enough. And there was also, in stuff like the opening scene, I was also getting a bit of vibes of like Richard Kuklinski, the Shannon character in The Iceman, or The Real Life Killer if you saw those documentaries. I was getting a little bit of that from his character too, only with a lot more heart, that we mainly see through his interactions with his mother. And really, though, it's one of those cases where you can certainly, because the movie is so vague in like the first 25 minutes, or the entire 90, but to where you could see an audience member like trying to piece every little thing together that the movie throws at us. Like he does like one thing, or he's holding like one item, and we're like, oh, what is that, or what? Why is he doing this, or what is it that he does? Where does he come from, and all that. But I think most people might just go into this and just kind of let it happen, and how it's kind of like we don't really spend that time trying to figure out what these things are. We just kind of take them as they come, and just kind of figure we'll flow from one thing to the next, and it'll just kind of take us there, and we won't really need to put forth that extra thing, because if you put too much extra effort in it, you might miss something that's just casually in there. If you're trying to put a bit too much thought into it, it could just be, something that doesn't matter, but it's, while everything feels significant, at the same time, nothing could be significant at the same time. And it's better to just kind of let it lay itself out. But, I mean, if you are one of those people that does, find the entertainment value in trying to piece everything together as much as possible, I wish you luck, but it'll keep you busy. So yes, we go into, we see all these brutal sides of him, and we get into this really dark place that he's at. But then we also get some light scenes when he's, joking around with his mom and all that. I knew I liked the movie, like, 10 minutes in, when he goes in, and his mom is saying that, she was freaked out because while he was gone, she watched Psycho alone. And then in the next scene, the next morning, she's like made a mess in the bathroom, and there's like water everywhere. And so he gets her out and starts to clean it up, and it's like, one scene they're talking about Psycho, the next scene, his character, who we know has killed people, is cleaning up a mess in the bathroom that his mother made. And it's like, that's nice. I like you, movie. So, and yes, going on that, the movie is brutal as fuck, it's uncomfortable as fuck. There are times when it's not just, being violent and bloody and gruesome, but also, like, and even when I say, this is one of those movies, too, where, like, I describe it like that, but if I were to watch it again, it's probably not as gruesome as I'm thinking right now. Like, my mind has probably taken what I saw and exaggerated it, because it just hits that hard. But there's some gore in there. There definitely is. But there's also, like, there's a sort of claustrophobic or to it, too, where it's like, there's a lot of close-ups. There's one particular moment when we're following him and he's walking down a hallway, and I swear this hallway is just barely wide enough to fit his body. It's like, and so stuff like that does add that to it. It does get, like, it does start to get a bit heavy-handed. Like, dealing with his, PTSD from all the shit that he's seen by frenetic editing, that tends to get a little heavy-handed. Which is especially interesting because up to that point, I mean, besides, these, jarring cuts to show you him having flashbacks or whatever, the movie so rarely outright explains anything. Like I was saying, it just really just lays it out kind of vaguely for the most part. There's some things that are relatively easy to piece together, but for the most part, it's like, it basically takes the show don't tell approach, but at the same time, it's like really decisive about what it even shows. Like, it's like, it may show and not tell if it even shows. Like, even that, it'll be, like, really vague with, and you still kind of have plenty to piece together for yourself, like I said, if you're in a hurry and don't want to just let it lay itself out. And it does have a way of, after a while, there's, like, a huge lack of dialogue. I mean, there kind of is from the start, but it really seems to start to disappear, especially in the middle. Alexander Nimola's in this, and he's a recognizable face, playing a very crucial role in the movie. And thinking back on it now, unless I'm mistaken, I don't remember him having any lines. Despite being a recognizable face playing a very crucial character in the movie, I am pretty sure we never heard him speak. Because the dialogue just really takes a back seat. It's not even in the... dialogue doesn't take a backseat. Dialogue's in the fucking trunk at this point. And we just really go with it. And at this point, it does get... I don't want to say, like, it gets too artsy, because that's a bit dismissive, but it's like... It does get... I mean, I hate to say it. It starts to feel a bit indulgent. Just a little bit indulgent when we get to those points. Sort of as we're transitioning from the second to third act. And it's kind of, like I said, it's got that frenetic editing and kind of that in-your-face style. And it can be a bit much, and not really in the complimentary way that you would normally praise a movie for just being, like, so gritty and brutal and just thrusting you into, you know, the shitty sides of the world and all that stuff. It does start to, you know, wear itself down a little bit and gets a little too caught up in itself, I think. But for the most part, like I said, there's a whole lot to admire. There's what Ramsey's doing. There's what Joaquin Phoenix is doing. They're a match made in heaven. I'd love to see them work together again. And yeah, it's one of those movies that'll just it fucks with your expectations. And it's, like I said, and sometimes that might be frustrating, but ultimately, once it really settles in, you kind of get to appreciate it, the choices it makes and the directions that it goes, and all that. And so, yeah, there's not really much else to say about it. It's very short. It's like an hour 25, just very to the point about itself. But at the same time, feels like it kind of loses itself a little bit in the middle there, like I said. So it's very... Yeah, it might feel a little mixed, but as it lays itself out in your head, it's... Yeah, you become very appreciative. Just two right in a row to where it's like, I think I appreciate this more than I like watching it. But there is so much to admire, so... Yes. Alright. The last movie is going to be Forever My Girl. Movie that came out like a few months ago or something. It's like, yes, another great attempt to embarrass the fuck out of these poor young people that just wanted to be in a movie, and now they've been in this, and they've humiliated themselves. We've got, well, the girl is, when she, wasn't she the one in Happy Death Day, I think? Most people think that's a good thing, but that's them. And we have this other dude who's one of those, we did the blandest fucking casting call we possibly could. And now we've got this dude, and he's like a country singer, and he's gonna marry her, but then he doesn't show up to the wedding, despite the fact that all the people are around. It's like, the movie begins with a wedding, and so you're like, and everybody's all happy. They're like, oh, I can't believe this is happening. This is the day. And the family's like, oh, yes, we worked so hard on this. The friends show up. The guy comes in and is like, you look absolutely amazing. And then we learn that he doesn't show up. But it's like, when it starts at the wedding, you're just like, something's going to go wrong. It's like, either he's not going to show up, or one of them's going to die. Something will go wrong. Fingers crossed from gathering what we've already had in the first 2 minutes of meeting their friends, who I think most of the time we will never see again anyway. But then, obviously, the plot comes in, and it's the whole 8 years, just a fucking 8-year jump, like nothing. By the way, nobody fucking ages in that 8 years. So, they don't look just a little bit older or more mature or anything like that. The only reason it's an 8-year jump is because she's got a daughter, and, oh, who do you think the father is? The guy that left her didn't even leave her at the altar. She didn't get to the fucking altar. He just didn't show up. And they figured it out that quickly. So, and then it goes on, and like I said, it takes place in Louisiana, I think. So we're just drowning in these exaggerated Southern character types. Great. And our lead character is a fucking country singer. Just great. But the problem here is that after we watch him, he has a one-night stand, and he's a tortured musician. He's such a tortured soul, so he treats his one-night stand like shit. It's one of those PG-13, fully clothed in the morning one-night stands. You know those. And then he gets a call, or no, he doesn't get a call, he sees it on the news. Remember the guy that walked in and said, "You look amazing" in her wedding dress? That dude died. Oh no, the guy who thought she looked amazing in her dress died. I am so fucking emotionally invested. I am pretty sure that was his only damn line. So, and then he walked out of the room. And that was it. But he died. So that's the whole setting of this movie. And gotta get real emotionally invested now. So, now that we've done that, he learns the whole daughter thing, and it's such a tragedy. Not a tragedy that she had to raise this girl by herself. Not a tragedy for him that, oh, my life is turned upside down. I never even knew this person existed. Why was I such a shitty person? No, the real tragedy is that this innocent little girl is walking around made up of this fucking piece of shit's DNA. So she's gonna have to live with that now. Douchebaggery is in her blood forever. So, naturally it becomes I must change my ways. I must stop being a selfish piece of shit. He won't change career paths, though, unfortunately, because the movie's got to torture us with a country song every 10 goddamn minutes. Just because everything else isn't bad enough. So, as it goes on, this is the problem, is that they've done nothing but build this guy up to be a piece of shit. But we've seen these, we know this, okay, like, this is a movie, this is not. I know you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, all that stuff, but sometimes, if you watch enough movies, you can see the ones that are not going to do jack shit to change anything whatsoever. This is a theatrically released Hallmark movie, I swear to God. The only thing missing in it is Christmas. Because the thing here is that we know exactly how this is going to go. Because he's a piece of shit, but he's back now. And her brother is in this as well. And her brother actually says the line to her, "You are not actually going to let that dude back in your life now, right?" But, I mean, we know where this is going. You could tell way he said that was a rhetorical question. He knew the bullshit that was going to follow. I wish we could see this movie through his point of view. But he's barely there. And that's the problem. That's a problem right here. This is how you know you have just reached absolute fucking rock bottom, is when you start to miss... The movie is so cliche that you miss other cliches. Like, other cliches would have made it better. Because in any other scenario, in any other fucking Hallmark movie you can find anywhere, the conflict would be that he's come back 8 years later, learns he has a daughter, and is still in love with her, he realizes, despite the fact that he just completely fucking abandoned her for 8 years and disappeared. Not just him, the whole country, the whole country, the whole city, the whole town is heartbroken that he abandoned them. This is how special he is to everybody, this fucking cock. So, here's the problem, though, is that in any other scenario, we have the age-old cliche of he comes back and he falls in love with her again, but there's another dude. And then we have to go through that whole cliche of other dude seems nice for a while, but then, other dude ends up being a douchebag so that we can drop him and come back to the other guy with no guilty conscience whatsoever. But the movie is so fucking hell-bent on the cliche of they're gonna re-fall in love, we just cut out the middleman. There's no other dude. There is no... Once they meet each other again, there's nothing in their way. Because we know his asshole-ish ways in the past are not gonna make a fuck difference. Because she's just gonna be like... Here's what happens. Okay, this is how she falls back in love with him. Now, mind you, whole wedding's here. The whole big wedding thing, they're in love and all that. He just drops her like a bad habit, goes off, fucks, groupies and shit, does his whole drunken-ass, tortured soul, country star thing, and abandons her. with this child, no less. And she says, I tried calling you, and 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 you just didn't answer. That's why you didn't know that you had a daughter all this time, because you just didn't fucking pick up the phone when I called you. Me, the person you abandoned. Do you know how he wins her over again? He says, he looks at his daughter, and then he looks at her, and he says, she's got your smile. And he smiles like that. Point of no return. She's right back on it. She's like, oh, we can. She catches herself in it, and she's like, oh, we can't do this. We can't do this. But we know she's gonna do this. In every aspect of the word. And then later on, it turns out that he kept the message. It's so endearing because he kept the shitty-ass phone from 8 years ago because it still had her message on it. He listens to it every day. Yeah, somehow didn't know he had a daughter. I don't know. I don't remember what the fucking message said, but that's it. That's it. That's all it took. And it's like, you know what? We're gonna do this again. Woman, you and your daughter are in for a world of pain. But the movie's not gonna tell you that because the movie ends too early. So, this is the kind of sleazy piece of shit we're dealing with here. This is the kind of movie where, like I said, every other scene has a country song in it. This is the kind of movie where we have a dinner scene where a child talks with, no filter, and it's, bashing everybody and everything, speaking truths, and you have the other adult that says, she's got a point. Even though she's a fucking child and shit. We got that fucking laugh riot of a moment. This is another one of those movies that has a romantic helicopter ride in it. Now, last time I saw a movie where a dude took a woman out for a romantic ride in an aircraft, he took her back home and he beat the fuck out of her. Now, mind you, I wouldn't put that past this guy, but unlike that other movie, I don't think she's gonna like it. So, you know what the thing is you know what this movie is? This movie is, you remember the movie where Abigail Breslin had leukemia, The Ultimate Gift? Jesus Christ. I know that movie had its fan base, I suppose, and the Hallmark crowd. It might be one of the worst movies I have ever seen, The Ultimate Gift. And it's for starters, I was thinking, oh god, this reminds me so much of that. But then I started thinking, it's what about that Abigail Breslin character who died of leukemia is in a really good place right now? Because wherever she is, this movie's not. And then I started thinking more about it, and it was going on that, this is the girl from Happy Death Day, right? So it's I don't know what would be worse for her. If the time loop was her getting murdered repeatedly by a dude in a pig mask, or if this is what her career is now. Because she got a lot of acclaim for Happy Death Day. People, praised the holy shit out of her. Once again, I was not one of them, but a lot of people really took to Happy Death Day. I think she was, a runner-up at a Critics Award or something for Best Actress. And this was her follow-up to that kind of success. So it's I would think this is much more of a personal hell than being trapped in a time loop where you're being repeatedly murdered by a dude in a pig mask, but maybe that's just me. So needless to say, you go into a movie like this, and you basically expect it to be a total piece of shit, but I mean, this got, to levels of insulting I haven't seen in a piece of shit like this for a while. And just absolute laziness, and just expecting us to buy everything around the corner with this piece of shit dude, mainly. And yeah, this is one of those movies also where you can, really kind of pinpoint fan base, because it's we have the shots of him, got the fucking Trevante Rhodes shots, where it's just a dude in his boxers with his fucking hand on his stomach as he lays back in bed. And it's I'm sure there are people in the audience just fucking swooning over this dude, completely forgetting for a split second that he just dropped this fucking girl right before they're supposed to get married because he has a tortured soul, because he's a fucking tortured musician, or whatever the fuck it is. And they just keep trying to make excuses. This is one of those movies, the entire last half hour is just sob story after sob story after sob story. And it's fucking tiresome and doesn't no, just absolutely nothing works. So, yes, that's what that is. Movies like this have found a bottom point, and this is right there. There's like a whole dead pile of them at the bottom here. This is definitely in that pile, so not standing alone by any means, but it's in there. So, that's what that is. So, I am now going to consecutively shoot the verses that's coming. So, until next week is Super Troopers, and whatever else could come along, and then the week after that is the Avengers, obviously. And then we will close out April, so... In the meantime, we had this very interesting week, and so we'll see what those others bring, but I should probably get to work on that versus, so until all that stuff